So good evening. Thank you all for coming. My topic of lecture today is stylistic fingerprints of Rebecca Clarke through the lens of analyzing her Rhapsody. So when I studied with my former professor, Dr. Barr, I was introduced to Clarke's gorgeous viola sonata. I love the music and was very interested in her other works. So when I listened to her other Coolidge works, I sensed that Clarke has a unique style that's recognizable. And it turns out that there are scholars who have the same feeling. So Brianne Jones, who has a comprehensive study of Clarke's music, states that Clarke has her own stylistic fingerprints. A British critic, Callum MacDonald, also brings up the term Clarkean. It's not a real word, suggesting Clarke has a special way of treating musical materials, but neither of them clarify the details of the components nor define the term further. So I was intrigued, and that's how I started these projects. So here are the fingerprints I summarized through analyzing her piece. So the first is cyclic design, which means the composer will recycle thematic materials in the earlier movements and using them in the later movements. The second is cross rhythm and frequent meter changes. So cross rhythm means the regular use of conflicting rhythmic groupings, such as 2 against 3 or 3 against 4. And third is fluid movement between modal, whole tone, and octonic sonorities. Modal means church modes, and whole tone is the scale that only contains whole steps. Octatonic is a pitch collection containing 8 notes that alternate between whole steps and half steps. Last one is chromatic manipulation when developing materials or moving between different sonorities. And I will explain them in details later, but first let's get to know the composer. So this is Rebecca Clarke, and she was an English composer, and according to the Grove Music, she, quote, has been identified as among the most important British composers of the interwar years, end quote. Clarke majored in composition when she studied at London's Royal College of Music in 1907 at the age of 21. And this is Rebecca Clarke's compositional professor, Sir Charles Villiers Stanford. Stanford was a significant British composer and teacher. You may not recognize his name or his works, but you certainly heard some of his students, including Ralph Vaughan Williams, Gustav Holst, Frank Bridge, and John Ireland. Clarke was one of his small number of female students, and she did pretty well in the school, winning the prizes twice from the school's council. Unfortunately, Clarke had to discontinue her studies due to financial issues. So in order to support herself, she started to perform in the orchestras and chamber groups. She later became a well-known violist. Clarke then visited the United States in 1916 to get away from the influence of World War I. And she stayed with her brother at the time, and she still got chances to perform, and she had some time to compose. And in 1917, she met Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge. So this is Mrs. Coolidge, an important American patron of music. In 1918, Mrs. Coolidge started a chamber music festival in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. She invited a number of musicians, including Clarke. According to an interview in 1976, which was a tribute to Clarke's 90th birthday, Mrs. Coolidge told Clarke that the festival next year in 1919 will hold a competition for new viola chamber pieces, and she asked Clarke if she would like to compose one. And Clarke did, and the result is her viola sonata, which won the second prize in the 1919 Berkshire Festival. And Clarke ended up composing 3 large-scale chamber works for the festival, including the piano trio in 1921 and the Rhapsody, which is today's main topic, in 1923. The piano trio also won a second prize, and the Rhapsody was commissioned by Mrs. Coolidge and was premiered by the cellist May Muckley and the pianist Myra Hess at the 1923 festival. So these 3 works are called Coolidge works in honor of Mrs. Coolidge, the festival founder, and they hold a very special place in Clarke's output. The British musicologist Stephen Banfield thinks that these three pieces are her central works because, in comparison to her other chamber pieces, these three are notable for their scope, length, technical demands, meticulous construction, and daring sonorities, showing her sophisticated compositional skills. And in the span of 5 years, her compositional techniques evolved quickly. From the viola sonata to the Rhapsody, the music becomes more daring and more fluently employs different types of sonorities like diatonic, modal, whole tone, and octatonic, while retains her unique sound and style. Unfortunately, the Rhapsody didn't get as much scholarly attention as the other two Coolidge works. Because it is not an award-winning piece like viola sonata and the piano trio, it was a commission work, and it didn't receive positive reviews at the time. It sadly became Clarke's last complete multi-movement chamber work, even though she kept composing in other forms up until at least 1954. The other reason is that the Rhapsody didn't get published during Clarke's lifetime. Unlike the first two works, which were published in 1921 and 1928, the Rhapsody was published in 2020, so very recently. The publication of the Rhapsody offers an opportunity for us to further understand Clarke's music, and it is an ambitious piece with a cyclical design like the other two Coolidge works. It is similar to the previous two works in some aspects, including treatment of motifs, thematic materials, texture, and rhythm. But it also displays some new types of musical organization. It shows, as Jones states, quote, how Clarke's musical thinking had moved on since the trio, end quote. Analyzing Rhapsody thus provides significant new insight into Clarke's evolving musical language. So, what is a rhapsody? Okay, here is a list of the definitions I found from different resources. And as you can see, actually there is no specific definitions for it. So we could only find some common description that, well, they are one movement. There's no specific form for it. And it has a feeling of like improvisatory. So Clarke was at liberty when composing the Rhapsody. And this piece captures the improvising and the fantasy feeling, with the music flowing freely between different combinations of sonorities and rhythms. The music sounds spontaneous at first, yet it follows an inner logic for developing the musical ideas. Clarke's compositional teacher, Stanford, emphasized the importance of the unity of a piece, and it is a lesson that influenced Clarke's working method throughout her life. The Rhapsody achieves unity both formally and harmonically, while also exploring a wide variety of themes and colors. So the form Clarke chose to use in the Rhapsody is called the double function form. It is a form applied in Schubert's Wanderer Fantasy in 1822 and Liszt's B minor sonata in 1853. And here is the overview of the Rhapsody's form. So as you can see, it can be interpreted in two ways. That's called, so that's why it's called a double function form. So the up one, the blue one, is a 3-movement sonata played continuously without stop. The first movement is molto lento to allegro. Second movement is adagio e molto calmato. The third movement is allegro ritmico with a coda in lento. And the other interpretation, the green one, is a sonata form. So if we consider the first movement as the first thing in the exposition, the adagio movement as the second thing, and the third movement as a development and the coda, which will reiterate some themes of both the first and second movements. It can be viewed as the recapitulation in sonata form. So it's basically is a cyclic design. So here are some examples of the materials that got recycled. So you can see that the third movement is the B section of the third movement, and it's recycled the materials from the first movement. This is also the B section for the third movement. And this is the coda, which you can see it's reiterate the main thing from the first movement, from the beginning. And the second movement, material from the second music. So before going into details, we will talk about another important component of the rhapsody, the pitch class set. So unlike the first two collision words, which contain long passages that use a single diatonic or octatonic collection, the rhapsody moves more fluidly between various pitch collections. So I am applying Recita Hung's theory of transpositional combination to describe how the rhapsody moves between different pitch collections. Hung argues that composers often combine transposed versions of a pitch class set to generate pitch material. So here is a brief explanation of the pitch class set. So you can see here is a keyboard. So we can select any note as the starting point and label it as 0. And then we'll label the note that is 1 semitone away from it as 1, and 2 semitones away as 2, etc. And we will get a series of numbers up until 11 before it gets back to the note in different octaves. So if we choose several numbers as a set, and it always have to have the 0 because it's the starting point, but it doesn't need to be in a specific order. Okay, so it will become a set, and it will contain a specific combination of intervals and generate a specific sound. And it can also go in the other direction, downward, which we'll call it inverted. So the most important pitch class set in the Rhapsody is 014, which later will develop into 0147. And the intervals between each note of the set are also important. Clarke uses both original and inverted forms, and they are combined horizontally to form the melodic line, or vertically as a harmony. So it sounds like this. So this is the 014 set, and the chord sound like this, and 0147, and the chord. And the inverted 014, and inverted 0147. So all the opening themes of each movement contain the set 014 and 017. And now I will get into a more detailed description of the form, intervallic elements, motive transformation, and rhythm of the piece. The first movement loosely follows the schema of sonata form, with a forced recapitulation. The exposition begins with an unsettling non-diatonic first theme over an ostinato bass theme. So the 014 set forms the basis of this first theme. So I circled all the 014 sets for this theme and in the blue square. So let's hear it. So here is the 014 set. And it then resolves into a D-Dorian mode, which is the arrival point of the opening section. Okay, is that all right? Oh, oops. Let me put it down. All right, where are we? Okay. That's fine. Okay. Okay, so we just talked about the 0147 set. And Clarke also used these sets to build harmonies. So the 0147 set becomes a significant sonority once it occurs. For the following measures, the piano part is packed with these harmonies, while the cello is playing a many modal melody. So again, I mark all the 0147 chords, and now it's in green squares. Okay. So the first piano chord in the measure 9 is a combination of two 0147 sets, and it is the first harmony we hear. So this. Okay. So this chord complex is then transposed by a minor third up. Also, the spelling of the chord are the same. So it's a perfect 4, and a minor third, and an augmented second. So the piano part will continue with these 0147 harmonies. And the 014 and 0147 sets create musical tensions with their non-diatonic sonority. And these tensions sometimes will resolve smoothly into a diatonic or modal sound. This smoothness implies connection between the non-diatonic and the diatonic or modal passages. Stephen Brown's concept of modal adoration offers an analytical approach for showing how motives can transition between these two sonorities. Brown discusses 3 techniques for transforming and developing motives from modes and pitch collections. The first is modal lowering, which is lowering and flattening the scale degrees. The modal clash, which combines 2 forms of the same scale degree in a passage. And scalar tightening, which is reducing the span of a scale segment with accidentals. So all of these techniques are chromatic manipulations of scale degrees. So the scale center of Rhapsody's first 8 measures is D Dorian, because it is the arrival point of this passage, and because the pedal point in the piano is D. Oops. Wait. Okay, so applying Brown's method, the B flat in measure 3 results from the modal lowering of the 6th scale degree. So this is the D Dorian, and the 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The 6th scale is B, and lowering it create the B flat. Okay, and the D flat and G sharp in the next measure could be a result of scalar tightening, because they are the high and low point of this passage. Okay, so if I flat the D and sharp the G, the distance becomes smaller. And the F and F sharp, C and C sharp suggests the modal clash with D Dorian, which includes F and C, and the D Lydian, which includes F sharp, C sharp. And while the E flat in measure 6 is a flat second. And in the measure 18 to 20, the F sharp, A sharp, and C sharp is a product of the modal mixture. F sharp and C sharp come from the D Lydian, and the A sharp, which is in harmonic with the B flat, is from the D Phrygian. These manipulated notes form the 0147 set with the G in the phrase, leading the music back to the unsettling non-diatonic feeling. Another significant feature of Clarke's music is her use of rhythm. She often uses cross rhythms, such as 2 against 3 and 3 against 4, and she also tends to change meters frequently. Okay, so as you can see in this opening passage, it's only 8 measures, but the music already changes the time signatures 4 times. Okay. And the second thing is a linear melody in the Dorian mode, with arpeggiation in the piano part, contrasting with the first theme in mood and sonority. So I'll play a recording, and the recording I play in this lecture from the Midsummer Moon Rhapsody for cello and piano, performed by the cellist Justin Pearson and the pianist Jones, published by Downton Epoch. Okay, so another passage that's worth mentioning before going to the development is the music will declare a perfect 4th motive. In this passage, the first 2 notes of the bass line form a 014 set with the high point of the motive in the cello part, and the other notes in the bass line establish a 0147 set with the motive. Jones recognized its similarity with the perfect 5th motives in the other Coolidge works, and calling it a military motive. She also points out that Clarke only included this motive in her Coolidge works. Although Clarke never talked about how she came up with this motive, scholars generally believe it implies World War I because these works are composed not long after the war finished. And this passage declares the motive in both piano and cello parts in a canonic manner, and with the ominous bass line in the piano's left hand. And the section motive is based on B minor, the G and the A flat in harmonic G sharp in the bass result from the modal clash between B minor and B Dorian, and constitute the 014 set with the cello part. And the following development starts with the second theme in the left hand of the piano, but it soon will integrate with other materials from the first theme and develop. So after the development, there is only a false recapitulation, which presents the first theme, but not in its original form. So the upper one is the original form, and the down is the false recap. So you can see that it's not in the same position. It's a minor third up. So the real recapitulation will appear much later at the end of the piece. The music dies out before progressing into the second movement. And for the sake of the time, we won't get into this detail and about the other movement. I will go over some points very quickly. So this is the structure of the second movement, a free ternary form with coda. And almost all the phrases of the A section theme begin with an inverted 014. And the sets are derived from modal clash and flattened scale degrees. Okay, but I have to, there is an important part I need to say about this movement, that Clarke introduced the whole tone scale in this theme, and it is the first time we hear the complete whole tone scale, the 6 notes. And because it follows the 014 set that results from clashing E Dorian and E Lydian, the only note that is not included in both modes is the B sharp, and it prepares the appearance of the whole tone scale. And as we mentioned earlier, so this is, Clarke often used cross rhythms, and this is a very good example. And you can see that the cello is duple and the piano is triplets. Okay, so now let's hear it. Okay, so this is the B section of the second movement. It's marked molto semplice, which means very simple, and it presents a new melody in like modal melody. But we will hear it in the performance. Okay, let's move on to the third movement. The third movement is roughly in rondo form with an elaborated coda. And the recurring theme of the S section has strong rhythmic drive with frequent time signature changes. The theme begins in A Lydian, but soon at 0147 is in the green square. The set interrupts, and this set is formed with a flattened fourth, the D flat. And then the melody repeats in the piano part like this. Here, Clarke introduced another octatonic sounding pitch class set, 0258. This set, together with whole tone scale, become a significant harmonic components later. So the 0258 set only changes the starting interval of the 0147. So this is 0147, and this is 0258. So from 1 semitone to 2 semitone. So it's taking out the minor second in the sound. And it is also worth mentioning that because of their formation, each octonic scale can easily extract both sets. Okay, so you can see that's the 3 octatonic scales and the 0147 and the 0258 sets. And so let's hear a little bit of the beginning of the third movement. Okay, and the B and C section are constituted with materials from the previous movement. We already show you what materials they recycled. And in the coda, Clarke tweaks some of the elements when stating the previous themes and changes the sound slightly. So the first chord of the coda includes a 014. However, instead of having the G to form the 0147 sound, it uses F flat. So this adjustment removes the tritone, which will exist between D flat and G. It becomes D flat and A flat. So the first phrase of the melody in the same measure is also altered from 2-014 set to a modal sounding by changing the skips to the set in the sets to the steps. So the music exhibits less tension because of the temporary removal of the tritone sonority and the smoother movement. So it is notable how Clarke gradually loosens the musical tension throughout the piece. In the second movement, she brings out the whole tone scales, and the third movement, she brings in the 0258 sets. And the coda, which recaps the themes of the first two movements, but in a different manner. So although 014 and 0147 are still the core sonorities, by occasionally removing the minor second or tritone and reinforcing the whole steps and the whole tone scales, the music brings a more peaceful feeling and the tension resolves. So after scrutinizing Clarke's Rhapsody from the theory aspects, more information is disclosed through the process, and it further exemplifies and complements the points I summarized in the beginning. So in conclusion, this analysis of Rhapsody offers a critical and previously missing puzzle piece in understanding Clarke's unique style. It employs a fascinating structure that combines sonata and sonata form. The cross rhythm and the frequent change of time signature are prevalent and have a striking effect. And it proves that Clarke develops the whole piece from a small unit with all materials related. So therefore, the Rhapsody is to be considered an indispensable part of Clarke's compositional achievement. So let's hear the piece and welcome my wonderful cellist, Jessie Lee, to join me.